All right, welcome back to Untangled. I'm your host, Adrian Guillory, and today we have a truly inspiring guest joining us today. I have Eric Smuda, who is a globally recognized CX leader, named one of the top 100 global CXOs, who's led experience strategies at iconic brands like HP, Hertz, Avis Budget Rental Group, Walgreens, Humana, Mattress Firm, and Top Golf. Eric, thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So, Eric, I've done some research on you, but can you tell the
Clearly.
audience just a little bit, right? Can you tell the audience a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I've CX has been my passion really since I was a kid. My dad had a 35, 40-year career in market research, and I was always fascinated by the things he was learning, and it kind of sparked this. Why do people behave the way they do? Why do they buy what they do? Why do they make the brand decisions that they do? And so I've always been customer driven. And then the other thing that's really driven me is this belief that customer experience is the best way to grow a company. Yes, you can do mergers and acquisitions, but ultimately your customers either like you and keep doing business with you or they don't, right? And
Right.
so so that's really where I came from. I started kind of in the voice of the customer space, and then that evolved into okay, stop measuring and start doing something about it. And so that led to some of the roles that you mentioned earlier with Avis Budget and Hertz and others. So
Okay, awesome. So, a question I like to ask people is what was the field called when you got started? So, when I got started, it was human factors, right? UX was not even a thing. So, what was it when you got started?
yeah, in what I started, I mean, customer satisfaction was really just coming into vogue when I got started, but it really was growing out of the old quality management systems from the 60s and 70s, and it's one of the battles I personal battles I had because one of my old bosses what came straight out of that. He had won Malcolm Baldrige Award. He was trying to win a second to be the first person to win a second. And look, quality matters. I'm not saying it doesn't, but and process matters too. But there was too much science there sometimes, and customer experience is also art as well, and so we had to wrestle a little bit on some of those things.
I love that. It is also hard. That is the crux of a lot of what we do, right?
It
Um,
is absolutely.
so, so for my audience, can you kind of help them bridge the gap between CX and UX? What is the difference and how are they related?
Yeah, well, yes, they're inextricably linked. I mean, but I think UX is part of the broader CX umbrella. Just like the call center is. So often you see, especially in the call center industry, people saying, "Oh, we're CX." Well, yes, you're part of CX. UX is part of CX, right? As I think about the broader umbrella of customer experience, it's every way that somebody learns about and interacts with your brand, right? So it's communications, it's user experience online, it's physical, it's user experience in a physical location if you have physical locations. It's how do we deal with you on a human relationship standpoint, especially in a B2B environment. It's the call center, it's billing, it's our website and our FAQs. I mean, customer experience is the whole enchilada, and UX is a critical piece to how do you deliver an effective customer experience.
So I've worked for a lot of big companies, but I have to say I don't know that I agree with you, right? It's umbrella, it sits under the umbrella of CX, but if we'll talk about that proverbial table, I've never seen the CX table, right, where all of these things are kind of coming together. So have you seen that in your experience? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, I have, and what I the easy term I use to describe it is governance. And so some of these roles that you mentioned, Avis, Hertz, other places, what I try and do is build what I call a governance council, a customer experience governance council. And what that's really about is let's get everybody in the organization, at a decision making level together on whatever the right frequency is. Maybe it's once a month, maybe it's every 2 weeks, but let's get them together and say, look, here's everything we know about the customer experience. Let's agree on this fact base. But it includes, I want marketing there because they're messaging what should you expect in your customer experience. I want sales there because you're selling and you're setting the expectation for what that um, experience is going to be. Operations has to be there, right? UX has to be there. The digital design, the digital team has to be there. The call center team has to be there. So you're getting company-wide representation here, and agreeing on a facts base. Hey, here's what we're learning here. Here's what we're learning there. What are the things that we need to go fix collectively as an organization? And then because you're meeting on that regular frequency, there's shared visibility, but there's shared accountability to say, hey, we agreed we're going to fix these things. What progress are we making?
Definitely. I'm gonna definitely clip that piece. I want more governance. I want to see that in action because, like I said, I've yet to see it in a lot of these big companies that I worked for.
It's a missing ingredient in so many places. I like to talk about customer experience functions kind of being the glue for the rest of the organization, or the connective tissue for the rest of the organization, because it's really, you know, how do you bridge the gap between product, marketing, sales, and customer care, right? Or customer service. Product's off designing something, marketing's going to tell a story about it, sales is going to sell it how they're going to sell it. Those three things have to work together, right?
Yeah,
And when they break, then you have customer service to, be the safety net for the organization. But
I
that's the way
like
I
that.
think about
When they
it.
break, right? This should not be the first plan, right? It's when they break, we should have these other things. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that you write quite a bit about are things like ROI and adding value and customer churn. So let's dig into that a little bit. Um, Again, for the audience, what's the difference between acquiring a customer, keeping customers? What is your focus there?
Yeah, well, my real focus there is customer experience shouldn't be this altruistic thing. I mean, I think, we all believe, yes, taking care of customers is a smart thing to do, right? But when budgets get tight, or, resources get tight, does that get cut? And it's like, no. Customer experience needs to be the growth engine of your company, right? And so, and what that means is, how am I keeping more customers, right? How am I closing that leaky bucket? How am I making customers so happy that they're telling other people, or at least the social media vibe and the media vibe is, oh my God, this company's doing great things. You need to check them out, right? So that gets into the acquisition piece. How do you keep them longer, and how do you get them to buy more? And so, that's what it is to me. Is look, you're not doing customer experience because it's the right thing to do. You're doing it to grow the company. And I think your audiences are your audience is filled with UX professionals. Same thing there, right? And I know we'll get into this, but what are you doing? What are you designing that's enabling people to buy faster, or have a smoother experience? What are you doing to remove friction in whatever the process is that you're working on, right? Make a reservation, buy a product, buy a service, whatever it might be. How do you tie what you're doing back to revenue growth, right? Customer acquisition, those kinds of things that are important to the C-suite.
So I imagine that you've seen quite a few UX teams in your day. So what are some of the common mistakes you see UX teams or organizations, or how organizations treat UX, right? That you wish you could either teach out of them or warn them about? What are some of those common mistakes?
Yeah, I think there's a few. I think one is what we just talked about. How do you link your work to what the C-suite cares about, right? So, hey, I changed something, and customers can complete this transaction 10 seconds faster than they could, right? But when the CMO or whoever represents that to the CFO and the CEO, if they go and they say, hey, we saved 10 seconds in this transaction, and that's the way they frame it, you're going to get the polite little golf clap, and then the CEO is going to move on to the next topic, right? But instead, if you can say, we've saved 10 seconds, and therefore, we're able to process this many more orders, or, collect revenue faster, that's what they care about, right? So, hey, I removed friction from this process, therefore this happens, and that's the outcome for the company. Right? I think too
Okay.
often UX people think, hey, or even CX people too, hey, I fixed this. What's the so what, right? The C-suite cares about the so what. So I think that's one. Two, I think especially in the UX world is sometimes we get too hung up on the artistic side and the design side, because look, I'm sure there's people in this audience that are wonderfully creative and can do amazing things with design and user experience, but to what end, right? It's making it beautiful is not what it's about. It's making it beautiful and easy to enable something to happen for the customer and for the company. And so I think sometimes we get too caught up in the visual aspects of it.
Mm.
And then I think the third is, and I see this a lot, is changing it. Right? We get to the point that it works and customers are comfortable with it, and returning customers know exactly, oh, that button's going to be here, and I do this, and here's where I log in and do that. And then we decide, we're going to change the website, or we're going to change the flow, and suddenly you have nothing but confused customers. Why'd you change it? If it was working, if you had done the research and you have the metrics to prove that it's working, don't change it. Yeah, right. But I think the creative side of us says, we haven't changed that in a while. Let's go change it.
Yeah, I always find that very interesting. I tell people you have to do research before you do a major redesign, right? Because one company, I
And
won't say
after.
who, and after, right? Because one company, I won't say who, it was a banking site, and overnight they changed they changed the branding, they changed the colors, they changed the logo. There was no announcement, it just changed. And what happened is like people went to log in to make their payments because they wait till the last day, and they're like, oh, I don't think this is a real site, right?
Right. Right.
Which led to a spike in calls to customer service. It was like, we
And
could
a
have
spike in
prevented
late
all of
payments.
this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we could have prevented all of this. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
I logged into my bank yesterday, and there's a picture of a woman sitting on her couch, doing online banking. That picture's probably been there 6, 7, 8 years now. But it's like, it's a familiarity. I see her and I'm like, oh, hi. I don't even know her name, obviously, but
Hey,
there's my
Frank.
friend. There's the button I know I need to do, right? And it's just the familiarity of that process.
Right.
But
Right.
too often organizations, like you said, I mean, that's an extreme example, but understand your metrics, understand the research and the why did we do this, right? What's the
Hmm.
why?
Hmm.
And then, how do you A/B test those things? Hey, we changed this. Is it better or is it not? Right?
Hmm.
Or is this version better than that version? And so, having that before and after research is extremely important too.
So I didn't tell you I was going to ask this, but you just said something that sparked a question. So when you hear research, so they do a readout of some sort and they give you research.
Yeah.
Are you looking like what's some of the things that you're looking for, or you want to hear, or that would help you make a decision?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to our earlier conversation. What's the so what? How does it make it better for the customer, and how does it make it better for the business? Right? What friction are we taking out? How are we making it faster for customers to do whatever the job is that they came to do, whether it's buy, whether it's check a balance, whether it's check on an insurance claim, whether it's make a reservation, right? That's what I'm looking for, is what's the so what, right? A is better than B. Okay, so what? Right?
Hmm.
How is that going to help us? How is that going to improve the customer situation and our business outcomes? Because good to me, good customer experience is not just make it perfect for the customer. Good
Hmm.
customer experience has to be what's right for the customer and what's right for the business, and the intersection of those two things.
Which is a good segue to the article that you posted last week. I think it was customers don't hate AI, they hate waiting.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So you had all kind of graphics in there about how people respond to AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there is a balance between what the business can and should do. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
what is that decision that businesses are making in terms of AI and how they use it or support their customers on their experiences?
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. The enlightened businesses are looking at it and saying, how can I use AI to enhance the customer experience as well as the employee experience, right? So how can it enable an agent in a call center to be more knowledgeable, to get up to speed faster, to have the right information at their fingertips at all times? Um, or on the website, right? I call it the ride along chat bot experience. But think, for your audience, if you've used TurboTax, you've got that chatbot riding along with you the whole way, answering questions, making it easier so that you don't have to jump out of that process and pick up the phone and make a phone call, right? I think those are the enlightened companies. The other companies, I think, are saying, how can I use AI to replace a human because it's cheaper? That's the wrong answer. But
Mhm.
you referenced that article. What we're seeing is, and look, this isn't going to be a surprise to anybody, right? We've all gotten ADHD, but right, we've lost patience as humans because digital tools have made things faster. We've got 50 million things coming at us a day, and so our attention spans last about 3 seconds now. Um, but what that data was saying was, how fast do you give up on trying to solve a problem? If I can't find the answer myself, I give up. If I have to make a phone call and wait, I give up. But the bigger implication was what happens when you give up. I stop buying from that company. I stop using their product. I stop using their service. Maybe I go on social media and become a detractor. Right? The bigger implication for the business is they're not your customer anymore, or they're actively looking to not be your customer anymore. And so, you know, the conversation with AI is how do we enable that, or how do we prevent that from happening? And so there's a major telecom company, right? We only have two or three in the world or in this country, so figure out which one it is. But they were advertising, hey, we guarantee no more than 5 minute hold time if you call us. That's a long time,
That's a
right?
long.
We as people don't have that attention span anymore. And then what? You're going to put hold music on and you're going to tell me your call is very important to us. No, it's not, right? There's a good application for AI to say, can AI solve 80 to 90% of those problems and get people the answer they need? That's a great use of AI.
Thinking about your career, what were some aha moments that um, either because when we start like UX organizations or whatever, we're always looking for like that win. So, do you have any wins that come to mind where you were like proving the value of CX and you felt good about it, your stakeholders felt good about it?
Yeah, and look, it all goes back to the customer, right? But I'll give, because I worked at both Avis and Hertz, I'll give you the same story twice that played out differently.
Okay.
When I was at Avis, we had done some market research, and for those in the audience who've rented a car, or maybe haven't rented a car, right? The old days of car rental were, hey Adrian, thanks for your reservation. Your car's in spot 220. Here's how to get there. Have a nice rental. Right? We did some market research when I was at Avis that said if we gave customers a choice of vehicles rather than just you're in spot 220, there was $100 million plus of revenue on the table, maybe as high as 300 to 400 million, and 5 or 6 points of market share. Avis decided that would be too difficult to change their operations to enable that and chose not to do it. When I switched from the red team to the gold team, obviously I didn't take anything proprietary with me, but I shared the insight with people and they said, hey, let's redo that research and see if we get a similar result. And we did, right? 2 to 400 million in revenue, and 4 to 6 points of market share. So it was slightly different, but scale wise, it was relatively equal. And Hertz said, let's go for it. Right? And so we redesigned the reservation system, we redesigned the lot designs, we redesigned all of customer communications, we redesigned the inventory management or the fleet management systems. We redesigned the wayfinding. I mean, talk about UX, right? All of the wayfinding that happens on a lot, so that you know where to go and what cars you have available to choose from. We changed all of that,
Mm-hmm.
and you know
Mm-hmm.
what? We got 200 to 300 million dollars in revenue and several points of market share. So but it starts with listening to customers and what are their needs and what are their wants.
I love that. I think one of the challenges UXers typically have is being able to get to those numbers.
Yeah.
So, who in these organizations should they be partnering with to be able to say, you know, based on this research, we'll save this, we have the opportunity to do this, we'll see this on the bottom line? Who should they be partnering with?
Yeah. You obviously you did your homework on me and you've seen some of the things I've written. One of the things I wrote about a couple of years ago, and I believe it to this day, and I don't believe it will ever change, is the best or the most important relationship CX and by default UX teams need to have is with your finance organization, right? Hey, we want to change this. We believe it will do this. What is that worth?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because look, as CX and UX people, finance is not our that's not our expertise, right? And so let's get help from the professionals to really validate that. But more importantly, what it does is it gets somebody in finance to sign off on that business case and say, yes, if this happens, that will happen. And so when it gets to be an executive level conversation, the CFO can say, yes, I buy off on that. I've signed off on that. Here's the investment. Go do it. And so building that relationship with your finance organization. It doesn't have to be the CFO. If you're a manager level employee, build it with a peer there, right? Or maybe one level up. But have lunch with them once a month. Build that relationship so that when you need that funding or when you're trying to build that business case, you can say, hey, back to X, right? I've seen business cases in the call center that said, hey, we shaved 10 seconds off our average call. What's that worth? And the finance people will sign off on it. Same thing with the digital process in the UX space, right? Hey, we've shaved 10 seconds off of filing a claim or making a reservation or buying a product, whatever it might be, right? What's that worth to the organization? So,
Mm-hmm.
having that relationship with your finance folks is incredibly important. They're there
I
to
have
help. They're there to help you, not just take money
to
away
say
from you.
no. No.
Well, they say no because you haven't built the business case, right? And you
Mhm.
haven't built the relationship. I've had several cases in my career where because I built the relationship with the finance people, they came back to me for the first time and said no because you're thinking about it the wrong way. But if we change your model and we do this instead, here's how I can help you get to yes. They want to help because they want to grow the company.
And it should be leading with that focus, how we're going to grow the company.
Right.
Thinking about that, what are some other relationships that you feel like are important for CXers and UXers to build in these organizations?
All of them, right? I mean, I think that's where a lot of UX and CX people get in trouble is they sit in their cube or in their office or at home, right? In now a hybrid or work at home environment, and they're happy doing their jobs, but they don't understand the connection to upstream and downstream. They don't build the relationships with the HR people, with the finance people, with the operations people, with the digital team, depending on where they sit.
Mm-hmm.
Back to our earlier conversation about CX and UX kind of being the glue between product marketing, sales, and other functions, then you better have relationships with all those functions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that, I know we were going to talk about career growth. That's where career growth comes from, right? If you're sitting at home or in your cube and you're not interacting with these people and nobody knows what you're doing, you can build the best UX design in the world. And, they might pull you up on stage and say, hey, Adrian did this. Great job, Adrian. Now go back to work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Versus if you have those relationships, somebody in the organization, and it often happens when you're not in the room, is going to say, you know what? Adrian's killing it on this. We need to give her more opportunity. We need to give her a bigger role. We need to, see if her talents might be um, better suited in a different, bigger role in the organization. So, but you have to have those relationships.
So I know relationships is going to be on the top of that list, but
Yeah,
thinking about your career, what has made you so successful?
I think we've covered a lot of it here, right? It's how do you build those relationships? It's how do you tie what you do back to business metrics, right? So often in the CX space and the digital space and the UX space, we talk about conversion rates or time to do this, right? Or in the call center, average handle time. Yeah, that's all well and good, but so what, right? Look at what your CEO and your CFO are talking about,
Mm-hmm.
right? What's our market share? How much did our revenue grow? How many new customers did we get? What are we doing with profit, right? So you have to tie what you're working on and what you're contributing to the company. And it's important. I mean, I'm not saying, they wouldn't employ you if it wasn't important. Um, but tie what you do to the things that the people at the C suite care about.
What do
And look, for UX, that's critical. Everything you do touches the customer. So
mhm.
here's how we made life easier for a customer, and that translates to, you know, X more customers, or, you know, less churn, or more revenue, or whatever it might be.
So, a couple weeks ago, I saw a link. Someone was doing a test. They were trying out an AI moderated uh, usability test,
Okay.
exploratory. It was ironic, right? So the robot is asking me, a researcher, how I think AI is going to impact UX over the next 5 years, specifically research. So I will ask you the question the robot asked me. How do you think AI is going to impact specifically how people interact with our digital experiences?
Will it? Yes. I think the challenge for all of us is, how do we manage that so it's not the AI is doing it for us, right? Because I think then that might work in the short term. And I was it's interesting you said that. I was reading an article this morning actually about, I guess there's some kind of coding challenge, and the challenge was, how do you get 30 robots from one, it was like a chessboard or something. How do you get 30 robots from one end to the other in the most efficient manner possible? And they had ChatGPT, and, you know, OpenAI was there, and Claude was there, and, you know, Google and Microsoft, and everybody had their entrance. But the human coder ended up figuring out and winning the most efficient way to do it. And so it's going to have to be a partnership, right? But so is it going to impact us? Yes, it'll do the coding for us. It'll do it much faster than we can do it ourselves,
Mhm.
right? Um, will it give you design ideas? Probably. Can it execute that design by itself without human interaction? It shouldn't. I mean, I'm sure there's those out there that will argue, yeah, it can, or yeah, it will. It shouldn't, right? Because what AI isn't good at yet, and probably never will be, right, is emotions and understanding how humans react to things. And that's where the human partnership has to come in. Is, hey, I can execute this design, and maybe functionally it's perfect, but if people are going to react negatively to it, right, that's the value that we as humans are going to bring to that, is say, yeah, you know, clinic functionally it's right, but it's very clinical. We need to do this instead. And so, you know, will it impact us? For sure it will, right? I mean, you're seeing AI agents out there already doing all kinds of things. It will do coding. It can do things faster than we can do them. And it can
Mhm.
do them 24/7, because they don't have to sleep. They don't have to eat, right? They don't have to have a bathroom break, or social media break, or walk the dog. So,
Mhm.
you know, the challenge, but will it replace us? No. I think it will change the way we think about it, and it will take advantage of our ability to think and our ability to be creative and apply that to those tools. So it will make us better, it will make us faster, but it will also make our jobs more positive, in terms of, you're not spending your time coding something, or creating it, right? I mean, you're creating the design, or dreaming it up. You're not having to fingers on keyboard do it yourself.
One of the things that I tell my audience is to start thinking about where else you might pivot to, right?
Hmm.
Because I agree. My answer to that is there'll probably be fewer of us, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Fewer
Yeah.
researchers, fewer designers. So I'm trying to get people to start thinking about, where might you pivot to after? Like, where does that skill set fit in? So thinking about, and I think CX is one of those, right?
Right.
So thinking about that, what would you tell someone new coming into CX? Are there courses you would recommend? Are there books you would recommend? What would you tell somebody who might be interested in transitioning?
Wow. It's a little bit of a tough question there, because look, there's a lot of content out there. I mean, when I got started, there's a woman named Jean Bliss, who's retired now, but Jean was kind of the godmother of CX and CXPA. Anything she's written is gold. I would go find it and I would read it. Right. There's a great easy read that she put out called "Would You Do That to Your Mother?" And it's
Mm.
just case studies of companies that either did things really well or did things really poorly. And like, hey, if your mother was the customer, would you have designed it that way? Would you have treated her that way? So that's a great read. Bruce Temkin is somebody that's worth following. Bill Stakos is somebody worth following. Zach Hamilton is somebody worth following in the CX space. Um, Education wise, there's one Masters of CX Management program in the country right now at Michigan State. I don't know that that's going to survive, honestly, because I think the university's just doing different things with their budget right now. But there are certificate programs out there. Other universities have those certificate programs. The CXPA, has their certified CX practitioner, CCXP. That's worth looking into because you know it gives you both the practical tools, but it also gives you that link to the business outcomes that we've been talking about. I think for your audience, especially in UX, I think nearly all of the UX people I've ever worked with in my career, they're they're inherently curious, right? Why do things work? How can I make it better? Those traits are critical in customer experience too. So tap into that. I mean, my wife hates going out with me to stores or restaurants now because I walk in and like immediately see all the process problems, all the we're not serving customers right problem. The hey, if the customer's standing in front of you, why did you answer the phone first? Why is the customer on the phone more important than the one standing in front of you? They're not, right? So the other would be become data fluent, and that doesn't mean you have to be a data analyst, but how do you get your hands on voice of the customer information? How do you get your hands on all of the web analytics? And you don't have to be able to produce it yourself, but you need to be fluent enough with it to understand what it's telling you and what are the impacts and what are the outcomes from that. So get that's what I mean by data fluency. You don't have to be the data analyst, but you need to be able to understand, hey, what does web analytics mean, and how do I use that? What do voice of the customer data mean, and how do I use that? What behavioral data or operational data exists in the company that can give me insight into what customers are doing or what's important to customers. So
I love that. Okay. All right. So, Eric, thinking about design, what are some examples to you of good design, good UI design?
yeah, I mean, look, I think the best are the biggest companies in the world, right? Apple, Google. Apple obsesses over details, but think about Apple. I push a button and I have every app on my phone available to me. I can do this, right? One button push, maybe two, and you can do anything you want on your iPhone, right? Or
Mhm.
whatever their product is. Think about Google, right? Google's homepage is is basically a white canvas. Every once in a while, somebody will decorate it with a doodle or something, but it's a white homepage with a search box in the middle of it. And yet, that simple search box can open up the entire world to you and give you an answer in under 1.2 seconds. It can't get any more simpler than that, right?
Mhm.
But we think about, signing up to be a banking customer or becoming an insurance customer or something. Like, how complicated do we make that? We make it so hard to become a customer. You got to fill out this form, and then you got to do this, and then you got to do that, and screen after screen after screen, button push after button push after button push. Versus, how easy is it to cancel your insurance policy? Right? Go
Mhm.
online, cancel. Pick up the phone, one phone call, cancel. We make it easier to not be a customer than we do to be a customer.
What I love about the Apple example is my favorite word is intentionality. And everything is so intentional with
I
Apple,
love it.
right? You come into this ecosystem and it doesn't make sense to leave it, right? Like so then you buy all the Apple products and everything is all connected. It's so much thought that goes into that experience. And you have your, you have your blue dots and you have your green dots, right? Like they created this environment where it just makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I love
No,
that.
I love that notion of intentionality. And look at them in AI right now. I mean, I think as users, we would say, God, they're way behind what ChatGPT is doing or other things like that. But it goes back to your point about intentionality. Don't kid yourself. Somewhere out in Cupertino and elsewhere around the world, they're absolutely thinking about that. And when they
Hmm.
get it right and when they get it up to their standards, they're going to come out with it. And it will probably blow away everything else that's in the market. But right now they're looked at as laggards and behind, but it's because of that intentionality. They're thinking about how do I really want to use this to enable a better user experience.
The other thing you said there that I think is important is they obsess over those details because what do they say? The devil is in the details, right? Like they have to get into all of those details to make sure they do it right.
Yeah. Look
Um,
at their packaging, right? I mean, a box is a box, right? You could throw a couple AirPods in any old box. No, they really think about all of the details there.
hmm hmm. So on the flip side, what does bad design look like to you?
I think, I mentioned it a minute ago. Bad design is, too many pages, too many clicks, right? What is the minimum? What's the minimum number of steps you can take to accomplish a task, right?
Hmm.
Uh, you
Hmm.
know, I think there's bad, customer churn is one, right? Try and cancel with the cable company, right? They're going to run you through, well, what if I gave you this offer? What if I gave you that offer? What if I gave you this? And it's like we make it difficult, right? And I understand why, right? There's revenue reasons, but uh, I think um, with bad design, I mean, with customer experience and user experience, it's how fast can I enable them to get the job done, right?
Hmm.
We talked. I talked a minute ago about banks, insurance companies, a whole host of other things, right? It's easier to cancel. It's easier to not be your customer than it is to be your customer, and I think there's a lot of bad design out there that way.
Hmm.
The other simpler things, broken links. I mean, that's just bad design. I got on a website the other day that somebody recommended, and literally the first 6 links that I clicked, I got the 404 error. Like somebody's just not keeping up with, hey, we moved this and forgot to update a link here or a link there. And that's not easy. I get that's not easy, but right, test your pages. I love to say, eat your own dog food, right? You
Oh
built that
yes,
website or you built that experience. Have you actually tested that yourself?
yeah,
But one
yeah.
of the things I loved when I was at Avis, and this is probably more in the physical space than well, it's not in the digital space at all. But we used to have, big airports. Obviously, were the key locations for Avis. We would take once a year, for example, the person who runs DFW Airport for Avis, and the person who runs O'Hare in Chicago, and we'd have them switch jobs for a week.
Woo, okay.
And it was simply because, right, we all go through life with blinders on and we don't see things. We take the same route to work every day. We walk through the same door. We just don't notice things. But when I put the Dallas person in Chicago and the Chicago person in Dallas, suddenly they notice, hey, did you know that those 3 lights are out in your parking lot? That's a safety issue. Hey, did you notice that, this is wrong here or that needs to be improved there? So, you use your peers as well. Eat your own dog food, and B, use your peers as a peer test to say, hey, will you look at this and I'll look at yours, and how can we improve it together?
I like that because it's also in line with what we tell our clients, right? You need to put people in front of it because you're too close to it. You're not your user anymore.
Right,
You're too close to it and you have these blinders. You can't even see some of these things anymore, which is
right.
what makes it so important to put it in front of other people.
Yeah,
I
well,
love
you mentioned research earlier, right? Get to that design and then go user test it because
it.
they're going
Hmm.
to see it. They're going to experience it completely differently than you are because, as you said, they're too close to it.
Hmm. Absolutely. Well, Eric, this has been delightful. I have truly enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you so much for your time. We'll drop the link so people can go follow you. You have amazing content. So thank you for sharing those pieces out with the LinkedIn world. Any other thoughts before I let you go?
No, this has been a great pleasure. I appreciate the invitation and I hope your audience loves it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thanks, Adrian.